Hello everyone. Welcome to the podcast, where we explore in a completely new way. Let's step into the fascinating world of podcasts, where each episode brings knowledge and unforgettable experiences. Have you ever imagined that your closest friend could call you a failure while happily being with someone else? I went through that. When I discovered that my wife not only cheated but also mocked me with someone I knew well, what was my decision? Let's explore this unbelievable story together. Join the podcast as we dive into this intriguing tale today. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any new updates. Now, let's get started. Thank you for tuning in. My name is David, and I am a 58-year-old man who has spent the majority of my life in a loving partnership with my wife, Emma. Our journey began 27 years ago when we first met in college. What started as a friendship blossomed into a romance that weathered the tests of time and distance. We were more than just partners, we were best friends who understood each other in ways that few could. Our relationship was characterized by laughter, shared dreams, and mutual respect. Through the years, we navigated the complexities of life together, career challenges, family responsibilities, and the inevitable ups and downs that life presented. The bond we forged was strong, built on trust and a deep understanding of one another. However, as with any relationship, the journey was not without its hurdles. Our college years were marked by the challenges of long-distance dating, a trial that tested our commitment to one another. I took a job in a different city shortly after graduation, which meant that our once easy access to each other was suddenly replaced by weekends filled with travel and long phone calls. Despite the difficulties, we made it work, continually finding ways to nurture our love and keep the spark alive. Years passed, and we eventually settled into a routine that felt comfortable and secure. We built a life together, raised our children, and created a home filled with love and laughter. I often found myself reflecting on how lucky I was to have Emma by my side. She was not only my partner but also my confidant, the person I turned to in times of joy and sorrow alike. Yet, beneath the surface of our seemingly idyllic life, I began to sense a shift. The spark that had once defined our relationship felt dimmed, overshadowed by the responsibilities of daily life and the inevitable wear of time. Emma and I both busied ourselves with work, children, and the demands of adulthood, but I could feel a growing distance between us. Then came the invitation that would change everything, a college reunion. The excitement surrounding the event was palpable, with both of us looking forward to reconnecting with old friends and reminiscing about our shared past. It was a chance to celebrate our journey and rekindle some of the youthful exuberance that had initially brought us together. As the date approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. I wanted to show Emma that our bond was still strong and that our love could withstand the test of time. Little did I know that this reunion would not only bring us closer to our old friends but also unearth buried tensions and unresolved issues in our relationship. The night of the reunion arrived, and as we stepped into the familiar surroundings of our college campus, I felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter and memories that spanned decades. Emma looked beautiful, her face alight with excitement as she greeted our friends. It felt like a celebration of everything we had built together, a testament to our enduring love. However, as the evening unfolded, the presence of an old acquaintance began to shift the dynamics. Mark, a former classmate who had always harbored a fascination for Emma, seemed eager to rekindle connections with her. His attention felt unwelcome, and I could sense the tension rising as he hovered around us, often diverting the conversation back to her. Despite my attempts to keep the atmosphere light, I could feel Emma's discomfort growing. I tried to reassure her, reminding her that we were in this together, but the shadow of Mark's presence lingered. The laughter that had once filled the room began to fade, replaced by an underlying tension that neither of us could ignore. Little did I know that this reunion would serve as a catalyst for the emotional turmoil that lay ahead. Emma's unease around Mark was only the beginning, setting off a chain of events that would unravel the very fabric of our relationship. As the night progressed, I had no idea that the strong bond we had nurtured over the years was about to be put to the ultimate test. In that moment, as we navigated through conversations filled with laughter and nostalgia, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were on the brink of a significant change. The reunion, which was supposed to celebrate our past, now held the potential to expose deep-seated insecurities and challenges we had yet to confront. The stage was set for an emotional journey that would redefine our relationship and force us to grapple with the realities of love, trust, and vulnerability. During our time at college, Claire and I shared a bond that went beyond the ordinary. Our relationship had started as a simple friendship, filled with playful banter and study sessions, but it quickly evolved into something much deeper. However, the road was not always smooth. My decision to take a job several hours away after graduation posed significant challenges to our connection. We were thrust into the realm of long-distance dating, a trial that would test our commitment and resilience. The first few months apart were exhilarating and daunting in equal measure. I cherished the weekends when I could drive back to campus to see her, our time together filled with stolen moments and laughter. Yet, as the weeks turned into months, the distance began to weigh heavily on both of us. Phone calls became our lifeline, and I often found myself counting down the days until our next reunion. It was during these late-night conversations that we learned to communicate more openly, sharing our hopes, dreams, and the fear of losing each other. As time went on, our relationship weathered the storms of doubt and uncertainty. We both made sacrifices, Claire adapting her schedule around my visits while I committed to making the journey as often as possible. Our love was tested, but it also flourished in the face of adversity. We learned to value the small moments, the way Claire would light up when I surprised her with flowers, or how I could always make her laugh, even from miles away. Each visit was a cherished memory, solidifying our bond further. The reunion became a pivotal moment for us, an opportunity to revisit our past and celebrate the journey we had taken together. The excitement surrounding the event was infectious. We spent hours discussing who we might see, reminiscing about the friends we had lost touch with and the memories that shaped us. The anticipation filled the air as we prepared to step back onto the campus that held so many significant moments of our lives. As we drove to the university, the familiar sights brought a rush of nostalgia. I could picture the coffee shop where we had spent countless hours studying and the library where we shared whispers and laughter. The campus was adorned with autumn colors, and it felt as if time had paused, allowing us to relive those cherished memories once more. Claire's enthusiasm was contagious, and I found myself swept up in her excitement, grateful for the chance to reconnect with our roots. Arriving at the reunion, we were greeted by a lively atmosphere buzzing with laughter and conversations. Old friends reunited, sharing stories of their lives since graduation. The hallways were filled with familiar faces, each bringing a wave of nostalgia that enveloped us like a warm embrace. Claire's hand in mine felt grounding, reminding me that, despite the years apart, we were still a team. As we mingled, the excitement of reconnecting surged within us. I noticed Claire engaging animatedly with our former classmates, her laughter ringing out like music. It was heartwarming to see her so happy, yet I felt an undercurrent of unease creeping in. In the corner of my eye, I spotted Thomas, a name I hadn't thought about in years. Back in our college days, he had been a charismatic figure, someone who had always admired Claire. The memory of his interest in her flickered in my mind, casting a shadow over my excitement. The atmosphere shifted subtly when Thomas approached us, his presence eliciting a mix of emotions. While I tried to welcome him back into our circle, I could feel Claire's discomfort rising. Thomas's compliments felt excessive, and his gaze lingered just a moment too long. I noticed the way Claire's smile faltered, replaced by a tightness in her posture. Despite my efforts to steer the conversation, Thomas continued to engage her with stories of his success, all the while making sure to draw attention to how wonderful she still looked. The reunion, which had begun as a joyful celebration, began to shift in tone. As the evening wore on, it became clear that Thomas was not just interested in catching up, his intentions felt more personal. I caught Claire casting furtive glances away from him, and I knew she was trying to maintain her composure. Despite my attempts to create a buffer between them, I could sense the tension thickening the air around us. As I listened to their conversation, I felt an unsettling knot form in my stomach. Thomas's presence was overwhelming, and the more I observed, the more I realized that Claire's unease was more pronounced than I had initially thought. I tried to refocus on our friends, engaging in light-hearted discussions and laughter, but Thomas's lingering presence became a persistent distraction. The laughter that surrounded us felt muted, overshadowed by the undercurrents of discomfort. Despite our best efforts to enjoy the night, it became increasingly difficult to shake the feeling that something was amiss. Claire's laughter began to feel forced, her eyes occasionally flickering toward Thomas, who seemed oblivious to the tension he was creating. It was as if we were caught in a web spun from the past, and no matter how hard we tried to navigate through it, the shadows of old memories loomed large. As the evening drew to a close, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled within me. The reunion, once a symbol of our shared history and a celebration of our love, was becoming a source of tension that I never anticipated. I could sense Claire's internal struggle, and the weight of unspoken words hung heavily between us as we prepared to leave the venue. What was meant to be a joyful reconnection now felt like the beginning of a tumultuous chapter that neither of us had prepared for. The atmosphere at the reunion was electric, buzzing with excitement and nostalgia. As Claire and I stepped into the familiar surroundings of our alma mater, a wave of memories washed over us. The hallways echoed with laughter, reminiscent of the countless hours we had spent navigating through our studies and forging friendships. I could see old classmates greeting each other with warm hugs and animated conversations, each moment stirring the pot of nostalgia. We made our way into the main gathering area, where tables were adorned with photographs and memorabilia from our time at the university. Claire's eyes sparkled as she pointed out a few old photos of us, capturing moments that felt like a lifetime ago. I couldn't help but smile at the sight of us, young and carefree, unaware of the winding roads that lay ahead. It felt surreal to be back, surrounded by familiar faces and memories that had shaped our lives. As the evening progressed, we found ourselves in the midst of conversations with friends from our past. Claire thrived in the social atmosphere, her laughter ringing out like a melody, a stark contrast to the growing unease I felt. Every moment was filled with shared stories and reminiscences of late-night study sessions, spontaneous adventures, and the dreams we had for our futures. It was a beautiful reminder of our journey together, yet there was an undercurrent of tension that I couldn't shake. Amidst the laughter and reconnecting, I caught sight of Thomas in the crowd. He had always been a figure of charisma during our college days, and I couldn't help but feel a flicker of apprehension as I watched him approach. Although he was a well-liked classmate, I was acutely aware of his lingering admiration for Claire back then. My heart raced as he stepped closer, his presence casting a shadow over our joyful reunion. "Claire! It's been too long!" Thomas exclaimed, his eyes lighting up as he approached us. Claire greeted him with a smile, but I noticed a subtle shift in her demeanor. The warmth that radiated from her moments earlier faded slightly as she faced him. I watched as Thomas launched into a story about his career, detailing his successes and travels, all while ensuring to weave in compliments directed at Claire. "Still as beautiful as ever," he said, his gaze lingering on her a beat longer than necessary. I could see Claire's smile waver, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face. I interjected, attempting to steer the conversation back to lighter topics. However, Thomas seemed undeterred, reveling in the attention he was receiving from Claire. As they exchanged pleasantries, I felt an unsettling knot in my stomach grow tighter. Despite my best efforts to engage with other friends, my focus kept drifting back to Claire and Thomas. I sensed her shifting in her seat, her laughter now tinged with unease. Thomas's attention was becoming overwhelming, and I couldn't shake the feeling that his admiration for Claire had not dimmed over the years. The conversations continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Laughter erupted around us, yet I felt a growing chasm between Claire and me. She glanced away frequently, her smile faltering as Thomas continued his attempts to charm her. I sensed the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air, and my heart sank further as I watched the interaction unfold. As the night progressed, Thomas grew bolder, sharing crude jokes that caused awkward silences among our friends. I could see Claire's discomfort escalating, and despite my desire to protect her, I struggled to find a way to address the situation without creating a scene. The laughter of our classmates faded into a dull roar as I focused on the tension that was brewing right in front of me. When Thomas made a particularly distasteful joke about stealing Claire away, I felt a rush of anger flood through me. The laughter around us paused momentarily, and I shot him a warning glance, hoping to convey my disapproval without resorting to words. But the damage was done. Claire's face flushed with embarrassment, and I could see her retreating further into herself. Despite our efforts to keep the mood light, I could feel the heaviness lingering. Claire's laughter, which had once been so infectious, now felt forced. I leaned in closer, trying to engage her in conversation, to remind her of the joy we had come to celebrate. "Remember that time we snuck into the library after hours?" I asked, hoping to evoke a fond memory that would lighten the atmosphere. For a moment, her eyes sparkled with recognition, but the fleeting joy was overshadowed by the ongoing interactions with Thomas. The night wore on, and the uncomfortable tension persisted. I could see Claire fighting to maintain her composure as she exchanged pleasantries with our friends, but the shadow of Thomas loomed large. Eventually, we decided to step away from the crowd, seeking a moment of reprieve. As we found a quieter corner, I turned to Claire, concerned. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice low. Her eyes met mine, a mixture of gratitude and discomfort evident in her expression. "It's a lot," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, understanding the turmoil that lay beneath her composed exterior. The reunion, meant to be a celebration of our shared history, had become a source of tension and confusion. As we stood together, the noise of the reunion faded into the background, leaving us in a moment of vulnerability, trying to navigate the complexities of our past and the shadows that lingered in the present. As the evening progressed, I couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled over Claire and me. The once vibrant atmosphere of the reunion felt charged with tension, primarily due to Thomas's persistent presence. While he was busy regaling our friends with stories, I noticed the subtle ways Claire tried to distance herself from him. Each awkward laugh and forced smile weighed heavily on my heart, and I couldn't help but feel protective of her. I watched as Thomas continued to dominate the conversation, weaving in and out of groups while frequently circling back to Claire. It was as if he had set his sights on her, oblivious to her discomfort. My instincts kicked in, urging me to intervene, but I hesitated. Claire had always been capable of handling herself, and I didn't want to come off as overly possessive. However, my resolve began to waver as I noticed the way she flinched at Thomas's jokes, the laughter around us ringing hollow. At one point, I overheard Thomas make a crude joke about how he would steal Claire away if given the chance. The room fell silent, and I could see Claire's cheeks flush with embarrassment. Her laughter seemed to die in her throat as she turned her gaze away from him, and I felt a surge of anger course through me. I shot Thomas a look, hoping he would catch the warning in my eyes, but he appeared blissfully unaware of the discomfort he was causing. The conversations around us resumed, but the laughter felt strained, a thin veneer covering the undercurrents of tension. I leaned closer to Claire, whispering, "Are you all right?" She met my gaze, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and discomfort. "I just need a moment," she replied softly, her voice barely audible above the chatter. It was clear that the interaction with Thomas had taken a toll on her. Desperate to lighten the mood, I suggested we step outside for a breath of fresh air. We found ourselves on a quiet patio, illuminated by soft string lights that twinkled like stars. The change in scenery felt like a relief, a brief escape from the chaos of the reunion. I took a deep breath, trying to ease the tension that had enveloped us. "This is nice," I said, glancing at Claire, who seemed to relax slightly in the open air. However, it wasn't long before Thomas followed us outside, his approach heralded by his loud laughter. "There you two are," he boomed, clearly unfazed by our earlier discomfort. Claire stiffened beside me, and I felt her hand instinctively tighten around mine. Thomas leaned against the railing, attempting to draw us back into his orbit, his charm still in full force. "You know, Claire, I always admired your ability to lighten the mood," he said, flashing her a smile. "Thanks, Thomas," she replied, her tone polite yet distant. It was evident she wanted to keep the conversation brief. I stepped in, trying to redirect the focus. "We were just reminiscing about old times," I said, hoping to steer the conversation toward safer ground. But Thomas was relentless. He shifted the discussion back to his own achievements, clearly relishing the spotlight. The tension continued to build, and I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Claire's demeanor shifted once again as Thomas launched into another story, this one more elaborate than the last. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her smile faltered as she fought to maintain her composure. Every laugh felt like a performance, and the longer we remained in his presence, the more the joy of the reunion faded. In a moment of frustration, I turned to Claire. "Do you want to head back inside?" I asked, my voice low enough for only her to hear. She nodded, clearly relieved at the suggestion. As we turned to leave, Thomas called out, "Hey, don't leave just yet. I was just getting to the good part." His tone was casual, but I sensed a hint of annoyance creeping in. Ignoring him, Claire and I made our way back to the main area, but the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The laughter that once filled the room felt hollow, as if everyone was acutely aware of the tension that had built around us. Claire's expression had grown more guarded, and I couldn't help but wonder how much longer she could endure Thomas's advances. We mingled with other friends, but my attention kept drifting back to Claire. I could see her glancing around the room, her gaze flickering to Thomas every now and then. It was as if she was searching for a way to escape his orbit, but he remained like a persistent shadow, effortlessly inserting himself into conversations, always seeking her attention. The night dragged on, and I could feel Claire's unease bubbling beneath the surface. The moments of laughter and joy had become overshadowed by the tension that Thomas had inadvertently created. I tried to engage her in light conversation, sharing funny anecdotes from our college days, but my attempts to distract her seemed futile. Finally, as the evening wore on, I caught Thomas leaning against a wall, watching Claire with a gaze that made my skin crawl. It was a look that conveyed far more than mere admiration. There was an unsettling intensity that set off alarm bells in my mind. I felt a protective instinct surge within me, and I couldn't remain passive any longer. "Claire, let's grab some drinks," I said, forcing a smile as I guided her away from the crowd. She followed, relief washing over her features as we moved toward the bar. The sound of laughter faded into the background, and for a brief moment, I felt like we had reclaimed a sliver of the night. But even in that moment of reprieve, I knew that the tension was far from resolved. Claire was still affected by Thomas's presence, and I could sense the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. The reunion, once a celebration of our past, was turning into a complex maze of emotions, leaving us both grappling with the unexpected challenges that had arisen. As the night wore on, the celebratory atmosphere had turned increasingly strained, leaving an undeniable tension lingering in the air. Claire and I had finally managed to separate ourselves from Thomas's persistent advances, but the unease remained etched on her face. I could sense her withdrawing further into herself, her laughter not quite reaching her eyes. The joyous reunion that had once filled me with excitement now felt overshadowed by an undercurrent of dread. We made our way home, the silence in the car weighing heavily upon us. The hum of the engine was the only sound breaking through the quiet, and I stole glances at Claire, who stared out the window, lost in thought. The night had taken a toll on both of us, and I felt the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. I struggled to find a way to bridge the growing distance between us. "Claire," I said finally, breaking the silence that had enveloped us. "Are you okay? You seem a bit distant." She turned to me, her expression a mixture of gratitude and pain. "I'm fine," she replied, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. We drove on, the familiar streets blurring past us as I searched for the right words to ease her discomfort. The memories of the reunion flashed in my mind, Thomas's crude jokes, the way Claire had flinched at his comments. I knew she had felt cornered, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something deeper was troubling her. The tension in the car became palpable, and I felt my heart race as we neared home. The warmth of our shared history felt cold and distant, as if we were two strangers sitting in silence. Just as I thought we might reach our home without a resolution, Claire's shoulders tensed, and she drew a deep breath. "Robert," she began, her voice quivering, "there's something I need to tell you." my stomach dropped, and I felt the blood rush from my face. I could sense that this was the moment I had both dreaded and anticipated. I nodded, urging her to continue, though I could feel the weight of fear settling in my chest. "I've been struggling with this for a while," she confessed, tears pooling in her eyes. "Tonight brought everything back. I thought I could handle it, but..." Her voice broke, and I felt a rush of panic. "What is it, Claire? You can tell me." I reached for her hand, desperate to provide comfort, though I felt completely unprepared for what was to come. She looked down, gathering her thoughts as tears began to spill down her cheeks. "I wasn't honest with you," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had a moment of weakness. Something happened with Thomas." My heart dropped as her words sank in. I felt as if the ground had vanished beneath me, leaving me suspended in disbelief. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking. Claire drew a shaky breath, and I could see the pain etched on her face. "It was after one of our study sessions. I thought it was just harmless flirting, but it spiraled out of control. I never meant for it to happen." A wave of nausea washed over me, and I struggled to process her confession. The memories of Thomas's lingering gaze, his crude comments, and the way Claire had flinched at his attention flooded my mind. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice low and tight. "Just once," she replied, her voice trembling. "But it felt like a betrayal. I know I hurt you, and I can't express how sorry I am." The pain in her eyes was palpable, yet I felt an overwhelming mix of anger and heartbreak coursing through me. We sat in silence, the weight of her confession suffocating. I felt the tears stinging my own eyes, the shock settling deep in my bones. Memories of our life together, the love we had built over the years, felt shattered in an instant. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead, I found myself frozen, grappling with the magnitude of her words. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I finally managed to ask, my voice thick with emotion. "Why keep it hidden?" She looked at me, her expression filled with regret. "I thought I could forget it. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. But seeing Thomas tonight brought it all rushing back, and I couldn't pretend anymore." The silence stretched between us, heavy with unresolved emotions. I felt an intense whirlwind of hurt and betrayal, swirling inside me like a storm. The trust we had built over the years felt fragile, and I struggled to comprehend how we had arrived at this moment. "Robert, please," Claire pleaded, her voice breaking. "I love you. This doesn't change what we have, and I want to work through this." Her words fell on deaf ears as I battled my own feelings of rage and sadness. "Love isn't supposed to feel like this," I whispered, my heart breaking further. "If you find it interesting, please like it. If not, please comment number 1. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video." As we pulled into the driveway, I felt the weight of despair settle over me. The home that had once felt like a sanctuary now seemed foreign, tainted by the revelations of the night. I turned off the engine, the silence deafening as I struggled to gather my thoughts. Claire's hand found mine again, a desperate attempt to connect, but the distance between us felt insurmountable. I looked at her, my heart heavy with sorrow. "I need some time," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. It felt like the only thing I could offer in the wake of the chaos that had unfolded. I stepped out of the car, leaving Claire behind as I made my way into the house. The weight of her confession hung in the air, a haunting reminder of the trust that had been broken. The night had transformed us both, and as I closed the door behind me, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. In the days that followed Claire's confession, the atmosphere in our home felt heavy and charged with unspoken words. I was a whirlwind of emotions, oscillating between anger, sadness, and disbelief. The shock of her betrayal settled in my chest like a lead weight, and every room felt tainted by the memories of what had transpired. I found it difficult to face her. Each time I looked at Claire, the memories of her tears and the words she had spoken echoed in my mind. It was hard to reconcile the woman I loved with the reality of what she had done. I had trusted her completely, and now that trust lay in ruins at my feet. The very foundation of our relationship felt shaken, and I was left to pick up the pieces on my own. In an attempt to find clarity, I took long walks in the evenings. The familiar routes through our neighborhood now felt different, every step heavy with contemplation. I replayed the night of the reunion in my mind, the laughter of our friends mixing with the stark reality of Claire's confession. The image of Thomas lurking in the background haunted me, his presence felt like a stain on our history. During one of these walks, I called my son, Jake. He answered with surprise, and I could hear the background noise of his busy life. "Dad? Is everything okay?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. I hesitated, unsure of how to share the turmoil I was feeling without overwhelming him. "I need to talk to you about something," I finally said, my voice shaking slightly. When we met the next day, I could see the worry etched on his face. "What's going on?" he asked, settling into a chair across from me. I took a deep breath, struggling to find the right words. "It's about your mom," I began, and I watched his expression shift from curiosity to concern. "Did something happen?" he pressed. I looked away, gathering my thoughts. She was unfaithful," I confessed, the words feeling like a punch to my gut. Jake's eyes widened in shock, and I could see the hurt begin to swirl within him. "What? When? How long?" He fired off questions, each one piercing through my heart. I explained the situation as best as I could, careful to shield him from the raw details but honest about the impact it had on our family. "I'm trying to process everything, and I don't want this to affect you or your sister," I said, feeling a surge of protectiveness for my children. Jake was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. "Dad, I can't believe this is happening. I thought you two were happy together." His voice trembled, and I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I had tried so hard to maintain a facade of normalcy, but the cracks were now visible to everyone. "We were, or at least I thought we were," I replied, my voice breaking. "I just don't know what to do next." Jake leaned forward, his expression shifting from shock to determination. "You deserve to be happy, Dad. You shouldn't have to live in this situation." His words echoed in my mind, and I felt a flicker of resolve igniting within me. I knew I had to consider my own well-being amidst the chaos. The conversations with Jake provided me with a clearer perspective, but I still felt a heaviness in my heart. When I returned home, Claire was waiting for me. I could see the worry etched on her face, and I felt a mix of sympathy and anger rise within me. "How did it go?" she asked tentatively, her voice soft. "Not great," I replied, my tone clipped. I wasn't ready to open up, not yet. Over the following days, we navigated a silent agreement to avoid the topic of her infidelity, but the unspoken words hung heavily in the air. I busied myself with work and chores, creating distractions to fill the void left by our fractured relationship. Yet, no matter how much I tried to bury myself in tasks, the emotional turmoil simmered just beneath the surface. At night, the silence between us felt deafening. I would lie awake, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. The memories of our life together, the laughter, the dreams, the plans, swirled in my mind, tainted by the reality of what had transpired. I had always envisioned growing old with Claire, but now that future felt clouded and uncertain. Claire attempted to reach out to me, trying to initiate conversations that I consistently deflected. I could see her trying to express remorse, her attempts to reconnect met with my cold silence. "Robert, I'm really sorry," she would say, her voice filled with desperation. But I couldn't bring myself to respond, the pain too fresh and raw. One evening, after another day of silence, Claire approached me as I was sitting on the couch, absorbed in thought. "Can we please talk?" she asked, her eyes pleading. I looked up, feeling a mix of anger and sorrow. "What's there to talk about, Claire? You've made your choice." Her face fell, and I could see the hurt reflected in her eyes. "I made a mistake." "A terrible mistake," she replied, her voice trembling. "But I want to fix this. I love you." I felt a bitter laugh escape my lips at her words. Love had become a complicated web of emotions, and I wasn't sure how to unravel it. "Love doesn't feel like this," I finally said, my voice steady yet pained. The truth was that her confession had shattered the foundation of trust we had built over the years. As I spoke, I could see the reality settling in her expression, and the silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Days turned into weeks, and as I grappled with my feelings of hurt and betrayal, I realized that I needed to find a way forward, whether that meant healing together or apart. It became clear that the path ahead would not be easy, but I had to start prioritizing my own well-being. The journey of rebuilding my life had begun, though I had no idea what it would ultimately entail. The days that followed Claire's confession felt surreal, a haze of confusion and heartache enveloping my thoughts. I wrestled with my emotions, caught in a storm of betrayal and disbelief. As I tried to navigate my feelings, I knew I had to consider how our situation would impact our children. The thought of Jake and his younger sister, Emily, added another layer of complexity to an already challenging time. After much contemplation, I decided to talk to Jake first. I wanted to shield Emily from the harsh realities for as long as possible, believing that Jake, being older, could handle the weight of the truth. It was crucial for me to gauge how he was processing everything and how he felt about the family dynamics shifting so dramatically. When I called Jake, he was surprised to hear from me, the concern in his voice palpable. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" he asked, clearly expecting a routine conversation. "Can we meet?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He agreed, and we arranged to meet at a coffee shop the next day. As I sat in the booth waiting for him, I felt the anxiety welling up inside me. I had never been good at hiding my feelings from my kids, and I knew Jake would sense the turmoil I was trying to mask. When he arrived, I could see the tension etched across his face. "Is everything okay?" he asked, settling into the seat across from me. I took a deep breath, the weight of the moment heavy on my chest. "No, Jake, everything is not okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. His expression shifted from concern to alarm, and I could see him brace himself for what I was about to say. "It's about your mom." As I relayed the details of Claire's infidelity, I watched the emotions play across Jake's face. His initial shock transformed into disbelief, and then into a flicker of anger. "I can't believe this," he said, shaking his head. "What happened to you two? I thought you were happy." The pain in his voice mirrored my own, and I felt a pang of guilt for exposing him to this turmoil. "We were, or at least I thought we were," I replied, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "But she made a mistake. A terrible mistake." I paused, trying to gather my thoughts. "I just want you to know what's going on. I don't want you to hear it from someone else." Jake's expression softened, but his hurt was evident. "Dad, it's really messed up. I can't imagine how you feel," he said, his voice trembling. "What are you going to do?" I felt a mix of gratitude and sorrow at his support. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I'm just trying to figure things out." As we talked, I saw the weight of the situation settle on his shoulders. "What about Emily?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. "She doesn't deserve to be caught up in this." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words. I had tried to protect her from the fallout, but the reality was that she would eventually sense the tension between her parents. "Yeah, I know," I said, my heart heavy with the thought of how to approach that conversation. "I don't want to burden her with the details, but I can't keep her in the dark either. I just don't know how to handle it." Jake leaned back, pondering the situation. "Maybe you can just explain that things are different now, but that we're still a family." His insight struck a chord with me. I realized I needed to find a way to communicate with Emily that wouldn't frighten her. "Thanks for your help, Jake," I said, grateful for his understanding. "I just wish things were different." After our conversation, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. It was a small step, but I knew I had to take the next one with Emily. Later that evening, I gathered my courage and decided to sit down with her. As I entered her room, I found her engrossed in a book, the light from her bedside lamp casting a soft glow. "Hey, Em," I said gently, sitting on the edge of her bed. She looked up, her expression brightening momentarily. "Hi, Dad. What's up?" I took a deep breath, the weight of my words hanging in the air. "Can we talk for a minute?" "Sure," she replied, her smile fading as she sensed my seriousness. I struggled to find the right words, wanting to protect her innocence while still being honest. You know how sometimes families go through tough times? I began, watching her nod cautiously. Well, your mom and I are going through one of those times. Her brow furrowed, and I could see her processing my words. What do you mean? She asked, her voice small. I felt my heart ache at the innocence in her question. It's just, things have changed between us, I continued, trying to keep my explanation simple. But I want you to know that we both love you very much, and that's not going to change. Emily looked down, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her shirt. Is Mom okay? She asked, concern etched on her face. She's trying to figure things out, I replied, choosing my words carefully. It's been hard for both of us, but we're still a family, and we'll get through this. Okay, she said quietly, the uncertainty evident in her eyes. I could see she was struggling to comprehend the situation, and I wished I could shield her from the harsh reality of adult problems. Can I still see Mom? She asked, her voice trembling. Of course, I assured her. You'll always be able to see her. She loves you more than anything. As I spoke, I felt a mixture of guilt and determination. I was grateful that I could still provide her with some sense of security amidst the chaos, but I knew the road ahead would be challenging. After our conversation, I left Emily's room, feeling a wave of sadness wash over me. I had shared the news without burdening her with unnecessary details, but I knew the impact of our family's changes would resonate long after that moment. As I lay in bed that night, the gravity of what was happening weighed heavily on my heart. My family was in turmoil, and I could only hope that in time, we would find our way back to each other. In the weeks that followed Claire's confession, the reality of our situation began to sink in deeper. Each day felt like a struggle as I grappled with a whirlwind of emotions, navigating the complicated landscape of love, betrayal, and the quest for closure. I felt like a ghost in my own home, moving through the motions while the memories of our life together haunted me. Claire and I often exchanged strained glances, but the words that needed to be said hung in the air like an uninvited guest. I could see the remorse etched on her face, a reflection of the pain she had caused, but the chasm between us felt too vast to bridge. I was torn between the love I still had for her and the hurt that lingered like an open wound. Determined to find some semblance of closure, I began journaling my thoughts. Writing became an outlet, a way for me to process the tumult of emotions swirling inside. I filled pages with memories, both good and bad, reflecting on our journey together. Each word was an attempt to untangle the complex feelings I harbored: love, anger, confusion, and sadness. It helped, to an extent, but the emotional heaviness remained. One evening, as I poured my heart onto the pages, I found myself writing about the dreams we had once shared. The plans we made for the future seemed so distant now, almost like a cruel joke. I recalled the vacations we had talked about taking, the milestones we envisioned celebrating as a family, and the quiet moments spent together on the couch, lost in our own world. Those memories felt like shards of glass, beautiful yet sharp, reminding me of what I had lost. I decided it was time to confront Claire again. I needed to understand what had led her down this path and whether there was any hope for reconciliation. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I found her in the living room, her eyes focused on the television but her mind clearly elsewhere. Can we talk? I asked, my voice steady but filled with underlying tension. She turned to me, surprise crossing her features. Of course, she replied, her voice softer than I had expected. We sat down on the couch, and the silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. I need to understand what happened, Claire, I began, my gaze fixed on her. Claire looked down, a pained expression crossing her face. I know I've hurt you, and I'm so sorry, she said, her voice trembling. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. The sincerity in her words struck me, yet the hurt was still too fresh. But why did you do it? I pressed, needing clarity. She hesitated, her brow furrowed as she searched for the right words. It was a moment of weakness, she finally admitted. I didn't think about the consequences. I let my insecurities cloud my judgment, and I wish I could explain it better. Her honesty pierced through the fog of my anger, but it also deepened the ache in my heart. I trusted you, Claire, I said, my voice cracking. We built our life together on trust, and now I feel like that's all gone. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, the weight of her actions evident. I know, and I hate myself for it. I never wanted to hurt you. The conversation flowed between us, a mix of pain and a desperate search for understanding. We revisited memories, some joyous, others tinged with regret. It was cathartic, yet I still felt the tension that existed in the air, a reminder of the wound that had been inflicted. As we spoke, I found myself grappling with the notion of forgiveness. Could I forgive her? Did I even want to? The concept of closure began to take shape, but the road to get there felt long and arduous. What do you want now? I asked, needing to know where her heart lay. I want us to heal, she replied, her voice filled with emotion. I love you, Robert. I want to rebuild what we lost, but I know it won't be easy. I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. It was a complicated mixture of love and pain, and I felt a flicker of hope amidst the despair. Rebuilding will take time, I said, my voice steady yet filled with uncertainty. I need to process everything before I can even think about moving forward. Claire nodded, her expression understanding. I'll give you the space you need. Just know that I'm here, willing to work through this. After our conversation, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It didn't erase the pain, but it opened a door to the possibility of healing. I began to contemplate what the next steps would look like, focusing on the importance of communication and honesty. It was a small but significant step towards seeking closure. In the days that followed, I continued to write in my journal, reflecting on my feelings and the complex journey ahead. I poured my heart out, navigating the tumult of emotions while trying to find a sense of balance. I also started to engage with Claire more, albeit cautiously. We shared moments that felt genuine, laughter mingling with the remnants of our past. The process of seeking closure became a journey of self-discovery, and while the road ahead was uncertain, I felt a glimmer of hope emerging. I knew that rebuilding our relationship would take time and effort from both of us, but I also understood that healing was possible. As I continued to write, I found strength in my vulnerability, allowing the words to guide me toward the possibility of a brighter future. As the weeks rolled on, the fallout from Claire's betrayal began to seep into every aspect of our lives. While I attempted to navigate my own emotions, I couldn't help but notice the toll it was taking on Claire. She had gone from being the vibrant partner I had loved for decades to a shadow of her former self. The guilt and shame she carried were evident in her every move, and I watched helplessly as she descended into a state of despair. At first, Claire tried to put on a brave face. She attended family dinners, participated in conversations, and made efforts to engage with the kids. However, her smiles felt forced, her laughter brittle. I could see the flicker of sadness behind her eyes, a veil that never quite lifted. Each time we were together, the weight of unspoken words lingered, making it increasingly difficult for her to mask her pain. The nights were particularly challenging. I would often find her awake long after I had turned in for the evening, staring blankly at the ceiling, lost in her thoughts. On a few occasions, I would wake to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, tears streaming down her cheeks as she battled her internal demons. I wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but I was uncertain how to bridge the chasm that had formed between us. One night, I decided to confront the issue head-on. I had noticed how Claire had withdrawn, seemingly trapped in her thoughts, and I felt compelled to address it. "Claire," I said softly, my voice breaking the stillness of the night. "We need to talk." She turned to me, her expression weary but willing. "I know you're struggling," I continued, searching her eyes for any sign of acknowledgement. "You don't have to go through this alone." She looked away, her gaze falling to her hands as she fiddled with her wedding ring. "I don't want to burden you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're not a burden," I replied, frustration creeping into my tone. "You're my wife. I care about you." For a moment, it felt like we were on the brink of reconnecting, but then she pulled back, the walls she had built around herself slamming shut. "I don't deserve your care," she said, the sorrow evident in her voice. The conversation left me feeling helpless. I wanted to shake her out of this self-imposed prison, but I didn't know how. It was as if Claire had become a stranger in her own skin, lost in a fog of regret and shame that was suffocating her spirit. I watched as her once bright demeanor faded into a dull facade, her eyes often filled with a distant sorrow. As the days passed, Claire began to exhibit signs of deeper emotional turmoil. She stopped engaging in activities she once loved, such as gardening and painting, retreating instead into her own world. The house grew quiet, the laughter that used to echo through the halls now replaced by an uncomfortable silence. I could sense that her descent into despair was affecting our children as well, their innocent joys overshadowed by the palpable tension in the home. I often caught Jake and Emily exchanging worried glances, their once gleeful conversations now muted. "Is Mom okay?" Jake would occasionally ask me, concern etched on his face. I found myself at a loss for words, struggling to explain the complexities of adult emotions to my children. "She's just going through a tough time," I would say, trying to shield them from the harsh reality of the situation. One afternoon, as I was cleaning up in the kitchen, I found Claire sitting on the back porch, her shoulders hunched and her gaze distant. I joined her, hoping to draw her out of her shell. "It's a beautiful day," I said, attempting to spark a conversation. She nodded but didn't respond, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. I could feel the chasm widening, and it frightened me. "Do you want to talk about it?" I ventured, trying to probe gently. She turned to me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "What's there to talk about?" she replied, her voice tinged with bitterness. "I've ruined everything." The admission hung heavy in the air, and I felt my heart ache for her. "Everyone makes mistakes, Claire. We can work through this," I urged, desperate to reach her. But she shook her head, her expression a mix of pain and resignation. "I don't know if I can come back from this," she confessed, her voice breaking. Her words pierced through me, and I felt the gravity of her despair weigh down on my chest. It was as if she had given up on the possibility of redemption, resigned to the shadows that now enveloped her. "You're not alone in this," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. "I'm here, and I want to help." Claire looked away, her shoulders trembling as she fought to hold back her tears. "I just don't know how to forgive myself," she whispered, her voice barely audible. In that moment, I realized how deeply she was struggling, and it made my heart ache. As the weeks turned into months, Claire's descent continued, marked by a growing detachment from reality. She started to avoid social interactions, declining invitations from friends and family. I could see the toll it took on her mental health, her once vibrant spirit dimming further. The isolation weighed heavily on her, and I often found her sitting alone in the dark, lost in thought. I tried to encourage her to seek professional help, but she resisted, convinced that she could handle it on her own. "I don't need anyone else," she would say defiantly, but I could see the cracks beginning to show. In the quiet moments, I felt a mix of sympathy and frustration. I wanted to support her, but I also felt the strain of her emotional turmoil. It became a delicate balance, navigating the line between being there for her and maintaining my own sanity. One evening, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I couldn't let her descend any further into this darkness without trying to intervene. I resolved to encourage her to seek help, whether she liked it or not. The love I still had for her demanded action, and I was determined to find a way to guide her back to the light. It was time for us to confront the reality of her struggles, and I was ready to stand by her side as we faced whatever lay ahead. As the days turned into weeks, I realized that the weight of our situation had begun to take a toll not only on Claire but on me as well. The burden of navigating the fallout from her infidelity felt suffocating, and the emotional turmoil had become increasingly challenging to bear. I recognized that if we were to heal, we both needed to find a way to move forward, and for me, that meant taking some time for myself. After much contemplation, I decided to embark on a journey of self-discovery. It felt like a necessary step toward reclaiming my sense of identity that had been overshadowed by the turmoil of our relationship. I booked a solo trip to a coastal town I had visited years ago, a place filled with beautiful memories and the serenity I desperately needed. It felt like the right decision, a chance to escape the pressures of home and reflect on my life. The day of my departure arrived, and as I packed my bags, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. I was leaving behind the chaos, but I was also stepping into the unknown. As I drove to the airport, I took in the familiar sights, reminding myself of the life I had built, the love I once shared with Claire, and the hope that perhaps I could find a way to embrace new beginnings. Upon arrival at the coastal town, I was immediately enveloped by the soothing sounds of waves crashing against the shore. The salty air filled my lungs, and I felt an unfamiliar sense of calm wash over me. I checked into a quaint bed and breakfast, decorated with charming nautical themes, and I knew I had made the right choice. The first few days were spent exploring the town, wandering through local shops, and savoring the delicious seafood at small, family-owned restaurants. I felt a sense of liberation as I indulged in the simple pleasures of life. I visited the beach daily, allowing the ocean's rhythm to guide my thoughts and help me find clarity. Each sunset felt like a reminder that there was beauty in change and that life continued to flow like the tides. During my stay, I met Mia, a local artist who owned a small gallery filled with vibrant paintings inspired by the ocean. I wandered in one afternoon, drawn to a stunning piece that captured the essence of the waves. As we struck up a conversation, I discovered that she had her own story of resilience. She spoke about how she had transformed her struggles into art, using her experiences as inspiration for her work. Mia's energy was infectious, and I found myself captivated by her passion. We spent hours talking about life, art, and the journey of healing. She shared her own experiences of heartbreak and how she had channeled that pain into creativity. I found comfort in her words, feeling a sense of connection as we both navigated our paths toward healing. As our friendship blossomed, I began to embrace the idea of new beginnings. Mia encouraged me to express my feelings through writing, urging me to capture my thoughts and emotions on paper. I started journaling again, and this time, the process felt different. Rather than focusing solely on the pain of my past, I began to explore the possibilities of my future. I discovered new passions during my time with Mia, including painting and photography. We would often take long walks along the beach, where I found inspiration in the vibrant colors of the sunsets and the textures of the sand. It felt liberating to immerse myself in creativity, a refreshing contrast to the heaviness I had carried for so long. As I spent more time in the coastal town, I started to reflect on my relationship with Claire. I recognized the love we had shared, but I also understood that healing required me to look beyond the pain of her betrayal. While I still grappled with the complexities of our situation, I felt a growing sense of acceptance wash over me. I began to consider the possibility of rebuilding my life, whether with Claire or on my own. It was a challenging thought, but I knew that I needed to prioritize my well-being. I didn't have all the answers, but I felt empowered to explore what lay ahead, free from the constraints of past mistakes. As my trip neared its end, I felt a sense of renewal blooming within me. The ocean had a way of washing away the remnants of pain, and I had learned to embrace the beauty of new beginnings. I realized that life was not just about holding on to the past but also about finding the strength to move forward. On my last night in the coastal town, I stood on the beach, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The colors painted across the sky reminded me that change could be beautiful. I felt a mixture of gratitude and hope as I breathed in the salty air, ready to return home with a newfound perspective. I returned to my life with a sense of purpose. The journey had shown me that while heartbreak could shatter us, it could also lead us to rediscover ourselves. Armed with the lessons learned from my time away, I knew that the next chapter of my life was waiting to be written, one filled with the promise of healing, growth, and the possibility of new beginnings. As I returned home from my trip, I felt a newfound sense of clarity. The coastal town had given me the space to reflect and regain a sense of self. However, the peace I had found was soon put to the test as the day of Jake's wedding approached. It was a momentous occasion, one that was meant to be celebrated with joy, yet the undercurrents of tension surrounding my relationship with Claire loomed large. The day of the wedding arrived, and as I prepared, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. Jake had always dreamed of this day, and I was determined to support him fully. Yet the thought of seeing Claire again, amid the celebration, filled me with apprehension. We had both committed to putting on a united front for the sake of our children, but I knew the atmosphere would be charged. The venue was a picturesque garden, adorned with flowers in full bloom. As guests arrived, I felt a sense of nostalgia wash over me. This was the kind of love Jake and his fiancée, Sarah, had aspired to. I took a moment to breathe in the beauty of the setting, reminding myself to focus on the celebration rather than the turmoil within my own heart. As I scanned the crowd, I spotted Claire across the garden. She looked beautiful, her dress flowing gracefully in the breeze, but there was an undeniable tension in her posture. I felt a pang of sadness at the sight. The woman I had once loved so deeply seemed trapped in her own struggles, and it hurt to see her suffering, especially on such a special day. We exchanged hesitant glances as the ceremony began, and I could sense the weight of unspoken words between us. The vows being exchanged by Jake and Sarah filled the air with hope and love, and I found solace in their happiness. It was a reminder of what we had once shared and what we were trying to rebuild. As the ceremony concluded, the guests erupted into applause, and I caught a glimpse of Claire smiling, albeit faintly. I hoped this moment would bring her some joy, even if it was fleeting. As we moved to the reception area, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety about how the evening would unfold. The reception was lively, filled with laughter and dancing. I made an effort to engage with family and friends, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Claire. I noticed her laughing and chatting with some of our relatives, trying to blend in, but there was a layer of tension that lingered in the air. At one point, I found myself at the bar, pouring a drink, when Claire approached me. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above the music. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. We had been careful to avoid deep conversations since my return, but the gravity of the moment hung heavily between us. "Sure," I replied, leading her away from the crowd to a quieter corner of the venue. The music faded into the background as we stood together, the noise of the celebration replaced by a palpable silence. "How are you doing?" she asked, her eyes searching mine for answers. "I'm trying to focus on Jake and Sarah's day," I said, my voice steady. "It's a big moment for them." Claire nodded, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. "I know this is hard for both of us," she said softly. "I don't want to ruin their day with our issues." Her words struck a chord, and I felt a mix of empathy and frustration. "I don't want that either, Claire. But it's hard to pretend everything is okay," I admitted. She sighed, her shoulders sagging. "I understand. I just wish things were different. I've been trying to work on myself, but it's a struggle." I could feel her sincerity, but it was clear that the wounds were still fresh. "We both have a long way to go," I said quietly. "But I want to support you, and I hope we can find a way to navigate this." Claire looked up, her eyes glistening with tears. "I want that too," she replied, her voice trembling. Just then, the sound of laughter interrupted our conversation, and we both turned to see Jake and Sarah sharing their first dance as a married couple. The joy radiating from them was infectious, and for a moment, the tension between Claire and me faded into the background. I watched as Jake twirled Sarah, her laughter ringing out like music. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. The love they shared reminded me of the beauty that still existed, despite the pain that lingered in my own heart. Claire seemed to sense it too, her expression softening as she watched our son embrace this new chapter in his life. After the dance, the atmosphere shifted into one of celebration. Guests began to join the dance floor, and I decided to let go of some of the heaviness weighing on me. I took Claire's hand, and together we stepped onto the dance floor. It felt strange but necessary, as if we were momentarily setting aside our issues to celebrate our son's happiness. As we swayed to the music, I could feel the tension begin to ease between us. It was a small step, but in that moment, I sensed a glimmer of the connection we once shared. The laughter and joy surrounding us wrapped us in a warmth that felt comforting, a reminder that love could still exist amidst the chaos. The night wore on, filled with dancing, laughter, and heartfelt speeches. I caught glimpses of Claire engaging with family members, her laughter more genuine than it had been in weeks. It filled me with a sense of hope that perhaps we could find our way back to each other. As the evening came to a close, and the guests began to filter out, I felt a sense of relief. The wedding had been a beautiful celebration, a testament to love and resilience. And while our journey was still uncertain, the connection I felt with Claire, however fragile, was a reminder that new beginnings were possible. Walking back to our car, I glanced over at Claire. "Thank you for being here," I said sincerely. "It means a lot." She smiled softly, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "I want to make this work, Robert," she replied, and in her voice, I heard a hint of hope. As we drove home, the silence between us felt less heavy. I realized that while the road ahead might be fraught with challenges, we were willing to take the steps together, however small they may be. In that moment, I understood that new beginnings were not just about moving on, they were about embracing the possibilities of healing and growth, both as individuals and as a family. As I reflected on the journey that had unfolded over the past months, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. It had been a tumultuous ride, filled with heartbreak, anger, and moments of deep introspection. Claire's infidelity had shaken the very foundation of our relationship, leaving me grappling with feelings I had never anticipated. Yet, through the turmoil, I began to understand that this experience was also a catalyst for growth and transformation. The moments of struggle, while painful, had illuminated the importance of communication and vulnerability in our relationship. I learned that healing was not a linear path, it was filled with ups and downs, moments of clarity followed by periods of uncertainty. Claire's journey of self-discovery mirrored my own, and I realized that we both needed to confront our individual demons before we could truly rebuild what had been lost. The wedding had served as a turning point, a reminder that love could still exist even in the face of adversity. Watching Jake and Sarah embark on their new chapter had rekindled a flicker of hope within me. Their joy was infectious, and it prompted me to reconsider the possibility of happiness for Claire and me. I felt the weight of the past begin to lift as I recognized that our story was still being written, and we had the power to shape its direction. As I moved forward, I embraced the notion of new beginnings. The coastal town had given me the perspective I needed to appreciate the beauty of life's transitions. I realized that while the past could not be changed, it could inform our future in a way that allowed for growth. I began to see our experiences as stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks, each one contributing to our development as individuals and as partners. In the days that followed the wedding, Claire and I made a conscious effort to communicate more openly. We explored our feelings, acknowledging the hurt and betrayal while also celebrating the moments of joy that still existed between us. The process was not without its challenges, but I felt a renewed commitment to support one another as we navigated the complexities of our relationship. I also found solace in the connections I had forged during my time away. Mia's friendship had taught me the importance of self-expression and creativity. I began to channel my emotions into writing and art, using them as outlets for the feelings I struggled to articulate. It became a way to process my experiences, turning pain into a source of inspiration. With each passing day, I felt a gradual shift within myself. The anger that had initially consumed me began to ebb, replaced by a sense of understanding and compassion. I recognized that Claire was not defined solely by her mistakes, she was a complex individual, deserving of grace and the opportunity for redemption. I also acknowledged my own journey of healing. I was learning to forgive, not just Claire but myself as well. The internal struggles I faced were part of being human, and I began to embrace the notion that it was okay to feel vulnerable. Through the process, I discovered that self-love and acceptance were essential components of rebuilding trust, both in myself and in our relationship. As I stood on the brink of this new chapter, I felt a sense of optimism for the future. Claire and I were still on a journey, one that required patience, understanding, and a willingness to confront the shadows of our past. While the road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, I was determined to walk it together, hand in hand. The lessons learned from this experience would forever shape the way I approached love and relationships. I realized that vulnerability could be a strength, and that embracing the messiness of life was essential to finding true connection. The beauty of life lay in its unpredictability, and I felt grateful for the opportunity to grow, both as an individual and as a partner. As I closed this chapter of reflection, I understood that life was a tapestry woven from both light and dark threads. Every experience, every emotion, contributed to the intricate design of who we are. The journey toward healing was ongoing, but I was ready to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. In the end, I learned that while the past would always be a part of us, it did not have to define our future. Together, Claire and I could carve out a new path, one filled with love, understanding, and the potential for a brighter tomorrow. With renewed hope and determination, I stepped forward into the unknown, ready to embrace whatever new beginnings awaited us. My name is David, and I am a 58-year-old man who has spent the majority of my life in a loving partnership with my wife, Emma. Our journey began 27 years ago when we first met in college. What started as a friendship blossomed into a romance that weathered the tests of time and distance. We were more than just partners, we were best friends who understood each other in ways that few could. Our relationship was characterized by laughter, shared dreams, and mutual respect. Through the years, we navigated the complexities of life together, career challenges, family responsibilities, and the inevitable ups and downs that life presented. The bond we forged was strong, built on trust and a deep understanding of one another. However, as with any relationship, the journey was not without its hurdles. Our college years were marked by the challenges of long-distance dating, a trial that tested our commitment to one another. I took a job in a different city shortly after graduation, which meant that our once easy access to each other was suddenly replaced by weekends filled with travel and long phone calls. Despite the difficulties, we made it work, continually finding ways to nurture our love and keep the spark alive. Years passed, and we eventually settled into a routine that felt comfortable and secure. We built a life together, raised our children, and created a home filled with love and laughter. I often found myself reflecting on how lucky I was to have Emma by my side. She was not only my partner but also my confidant, the person I turned to in times of joy and sorrow alike. Yet, beneath the surface of our seemingly idyllic life, I began to sense a shift. The spark that had once defined our relationship felt dimmed, overshadowed by the responsibilities of daily life and the inevitable wear of time. Emma and I both busied ourselves with work, children, and the demands of adulthood, but I could feel a growing distance between us. Then came the invitation that would change everything, a college reunion. The excitement surrounding the event was palpable, with both of us looking forward to reconnecting with old friends and reminiscing about our shared past. It was a chance to celebrate our journey and rekindle some of the youthful exuberance that had initially brought us together. As the date approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. I wanted to show Emma that our bond was still strong and that our love could withstand the test of time. Little did I know that this reunion would not only bring us closer to our old friends but also unearth buried tensions and unresolved issues in our relationship. The night of the reunion arrived, and as we stepped into the familiar surroundings of our college campus, I felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter and memories that spanned decades. Emma looked beautiful, her face alight with excitement as she greeted our friends. It felt like a celebration of everything we had built together, a testament to our enduring love. However, as the evening unfolded, the presence of an old acquaintance began to shift the dynamics. Mark, a former classmate who had always harbored a fascination for Emma, seemed eager to rekindle connections with her. His attention felt unwelcome, and I could sense the tension rising as he hovered around us, often diverting the conversation back to her. Despite my attempts to keep the atmosphere light, I could feel Emma's discomfort growing. I tried to reassure her, reminding her that we were in this together, but the shadow of Mark's presence lingered. The laughter that had once filled the room began to fade, replaced by an underlying tension that neither of us could ignore. Little did I know that this reunion would serve as a catalyst for the emotional turmoil that lay ahead. Emma's unease around Mark was only the beginning, setting off a chain of events that would unravel the very fabric of our relationship. As the night progressed, I had no idea that the strong bond we had nurtured over the years was about to be put to the ultimate test. In that moment, as we navigated through conversations filled with laughter and nostalgia, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were on the brink of a significant change. The reunion, which was supposed to celebrate our past, now held the potential to expose deep-seated insecurities and challenges we had yet to confront. The stage was set for an emotional journey that would redefine our relationship and force us to grapple with the realities of love, trust, and vulnerability. Thank you for listening. See you in the next episode. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.